Pathology is a study of diseases, and we actually use that term, pathology, when we're talking about diseases in humans or animals or in plants, because the root of that word is pathogen. And in order for disease to occur, a pathogen needs to be present. So in plant disease, we're going to look at a couple of different factors that cause disease to occur. And it's important to note that there's differences between a certain condition and a disease. For example, if I break my arm, that's very impactful to my health, but it isn't necessarily a disease because it doesn't involve a pathogen, such as a bacteria, a fungus, or a virus. And the same is true for plants. There are a lot of different biotic factors, like an insect pest, or abiotic factors, such as nutrient deficiencies or light exposure issues that can cause the growth of a plant to be impacted, and the health of the tissue of a plant. It can be detrimental. But in order for disease to be present, it must involve a pathogen that infects some from the outside and grows within the plant tissue, causing them not to be able to function and carry out their different responsibilities. So, but similar, again, to humans and animals and plants, while we can, in rare occasions, share these pathogens, for example, rabies can be transmitted from animal to human, they come in three different categories, and those are basically bacteria, virus, and fungi. And most of them, once they get into whatever their host is capable of reproducing very quickly. And so we're going to be taking a look at these different types of pathogens briefly today, and also looking at the kind of damage they create, and also, of course, how to prevent them. So the first major category of pathogens are bacteria. And again, these are very, very small microscopic organisms. These are single-celled. And bacteria don't have chlorophyll. So they are these little organisms that get into an insect, generally through damaged tissue. So this might be through the bite of an insect nibbling on the leaves, or they can enter, actually, they're so small they can enter into that stomata from underneath in a leaf and actually enter in through those guard cells. Typically, bacterial pathogens create diseases in plants that cause kind of soft spots that are often smushy. We generally see this damage on roots and stems and foliage, and it's fairly common. Fungal pathogens, so fungi is its own kingdom, and it can be single cellular or multicellular depending on the organism, but typically it's multicellular. And fungal pathogens we tend to see in plants, again, they don't have chlorophyll since they aren't plants. They tend to affect the roots and foliage, and you've probably seen, like, here's a picture from my garden of little powdery mildew, which is a great example of a fungal pathogen. Fungal pathogens often create diseases that look like molds. But they can also be kind of fuzzy and on top, but they can also cause damage if they get inside the vascular tissue. They can cause rot. And then the last pathogen, and one of the more difficult ones, because they're, while we have antibiotics that can help bacterial infections, and we can have different types of treatment like copper and sulfur are actually natural fungicides to help treat fungal infections. We don't actually have a way to treat a viral infection, similar to like the common cold. Viral infections they're very, very small pathogens, and there's a lot of confusion about virus. For example, people are arguing, many scientists can effectively argue that they're not even their own organism because they have to have a host in order to survive. Are they plants? Are they animals? Anyway, so they're pretty confusing as organisms, but can be very detrimental because they can get into soil, they can spread from plant to plant, they're very, very difficult to control. Typically, damage from a viral infection is some kind of pattern. It usually shows up as rings or kind of a mosaic pattern where it almost looks like a stained glass window on a leaf. And so each of these different pathogens can create diseases with different symptoms and different harms to your plant. But it's important to understand when we talk about pathology, what's called the disease triangle. And pathogens are just one corner of this triangle. For example, I can have a pathogen that is, a bacterial pathogen. And as a human, I can touch it and it doesn't affect me because I am not a suitable host. And so, one part of the triangle is the pathogen itself. The second part of the triangle is the susceptible host. Tobacco mosaic virus, as the name would suggest, can affect tobacco. It can also affect members of the Solanaceae family, and that includes tomatoes, potatoes, peppers. But it might not infect members of the Poaceae family. So the second part of that disease triangle is being a host that is able to catch this disease, being susceptible to it. And then the final part of that triangle is the environment. So I can have the pathogen, powdery mildew, the fungi that causes that. And I can have a susceptible host, which is the squash family, Cucurbitaceae. They're very susceptible to that disease. But if I'm able to control the environment in such that that pathogen isn't able to survive for very long outside of a host, or isn't encouraged because the conditions such as humidity and temperature are not favorable, then I can also interrupt kind of that disease triangle. And that's something that we're going to refer to quite a bit when we look at prevention and treatment of different plant diseases. Can you keep the pathogen from entering, either by cleaning your materials, your hands, your tools? Can you plant hosts that can withstand that particular pathogen, or just simply don't catch that particular pathogen? Or how can you manage the environment within your fields or your nursery or your greenhouse or your turf, so that even though you have a susceptible host and you have that pathogen present, the disease doesn't take hold because the environmental conditions are not favorable for its spread. So the disease triangle is an important part of understanding pathology, and it's very important when we're trying to prevent and control diseases to our crops.